Randy, what are we talking about today?
Today, we are talking about overcoming the fear of public speaking. A lot of people are scared to speak in public, and they really shouldn't be.
In only 30 minutes alone, we will conquer
Yes.
your fear of public speaking and you will be able to speak to the masses. Probably not, but we are going to hit it with a few fun ways to overcome it. One thing I want to talk about at first, we are going to be at DrupalCon
Yes.
here in a few
Yes, we're
weeks,
going to
and there
be.
are a lot of public speakers
Yeah.
there. And I know there's a lot of timely content we can jump into with that. But I think when we were hanging out, one of my favorite stories when it comes to public speaking you talked about was there was a lesson that you taught your kid about not being afraid to just utterly embarrass yourself in front of people. I have
Mhm.
no idea what's going on. And it wasn't a talent show, right? It was like a stand up
No, it
routine.
was so yeah, so this is one of my, like, I don't know, one of my favorite stories whenever it comes to, like, public speaking. So my daughter, who was, like, maybe 7 or 8 at the time, there's a coffee house in our small rural Pennsylvania town that was having, like, an open mic night. And this open mic night was anyone could come and, like, stand up, and talk about whatever they want. It was a fundraiser for a charity. Like, all of the profits went to, a feel good place. And my daughter, leading up to this, is like, I want to get up and tell jokes. And I'm like, yes. I'm like, this is great. Like, you're young. Do not get a fear of public speaking. Like there's no reason to be afraid of speaking in public. And we get there and she's overwhelmed because the place is packed. And she's like, I'm not going to do it. I said, that's okay. I said, tell you what, I'm going to go up there and I'm going to be terrible. And I'm going to show you that it is not going to be the end of the world.
Yep.
I had prepared absolutely nothing. Although I am, renowned for my dad jokes. So basically I got up there and I told a couple of dad jokes and got the appropriate groans. And I ended with one of my very favorite, I'm going to put quotes around it, jokes that I like to tell people, which is basically like, what do you get when you cross a joke with a rhetorical question? And there was dead silence, as there's supposed to be. And then after a moment, some people got it and started laughing, and some people did not. And I just walked off the stage. Like, no thank you, no goodbye, good night, nothing. I just left them with that and walked off the stage. Getting up and speaking in front of people, it's it doesn't really it only impacts you when you let it impact you.
Yeah.
Like,
And I want to say I have a huge fear of public speaking, still to this day. Yeah, and for myself, something that it's interesting because when I first got into podcasting, I was terrified. I was very nervous. And then as time goes on, you get used to the studio you're recording in, you get used to your home, and you just become more comfortable with podcasting as a whole. And so if I ever had to give a webinar or if I'm teaching a class or anything where I've got a microphone, there's lights, camera, all that stuff gets turned on, I don't feel that level of pressure anymore. But you put me on stage, something I don't do as frequently. And I know a lot of folks where they would much rather have that than a podcast. They're like, where this is recorded forever, even though there's post production editing, whatever. But sometimes podcasts are live. But when I can see the feedback immediately, it's like, "Oh my gosh." Now, the thing that's helped is reps, like teaching in front of a class. It's like, "Oh, okay, the more times you do it, the more comfortable you get." Giving a talk, the more times you give that talk, you know, like, everything in and out. You know when people are supposed to laugh. But get me in front of a group of a large group of people and ask me to highlight my win of the week, I might not show it, but I'm gonna be a little nervous if I just get thrown into that to this day. And I think maybe there's an element of I just care too much what people think.
yeah, it's not uncommon. Like, I mean, even myself, I have a like periodically have a fear of talking in front of groups, because it depends on, like, I really want this group to like me. I really want them to think that I'm an expert. I want them to love me and applaud and laugh at all of my weird jokes
Yeah.
that I put into my presentations. And the reality is that, like, the first few times that you get up to give talks, like, I'm so sorry, but it's gonna suck. Like, it's gonna be real tough, like, no matter how much you practice, there's gonna be something that you feel like you could have done better, there's something that you could feel like you could have done differently,
Mm,
but it's one of those things that it gets better with practice.
mm,
And by leaning into that fear and being like, "Okay, listen, I'm going to mess up. I'm going to tell that really bad, like, joke that no one's going to get, and I have to lean into that so that I can get past it."
mhm,
Like, if you assume that you're going to be bad, just suddenly stop caring about if you're going to be bad or not. Just be like, I'm
mm.
going to be terrible at this. And do it, do it your way. Like, give your talk with the confidence, knowing that, like, hey, listen, if I'm going to mess up, I'm just going to mess up.
One time I was on a Disney cruise, and I remember saying, "Oh, like, I've got an okay Michael Jackson impression. I'll do Billie Jean." Now, the crowd and it had, like, just opened up, so there was probably, like, 4 people there, right? Not very there wasn't a ton of people, and I remember I couldn't really read the screen, it was so far away. Like, the layout of this karaoke bar was just you had to know what you were singing going up there,
Got
and
it?
sure enough, I do my impression, and there's, like, a bunch of Gen Zers there who you could just tell, like, didn't really know the tune. And so I'm like, in that situation, I probably got through the first few verses, and I remember being like, "Okay, I don't know the rest of the words. Am I just going to like hee 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 my way through the rest of this song, or like what am I gonna do? I only know so much of the dance moves." And so I remember I ended up just walking off stage after maybe 30, 40 seconds. And to the people there, I wasn't even embarrassed. It was one of those like, "Oh, okay, like this didn't work out." And I don't know, like, I felt like, man, I felt like I kinda conquered some level of public speaking there, because 'cause I'm sure to them, they're just like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Listen, either I'm gonna stand here and treat Billie Jean like it's tequila, where all I'm gonna my lover," like, unless that's it, that's all you're getting from me at this point, and you guys aren't vibing, you don't know the song, I don't know the song well enough to keep going. There's only, like, 4 of us here, and I don't think you guys put in another request, so I'm just gonna, like, change and go to the DJ and get another song. But not being afraid of just looking dumb and giving up on something. Um, I don't know, maybe there's, like, a counter lesson in that, like, "Hey, it'd been better if you would've stuck it up there and, like, tried to make it work." But for me, like, I'm a perfectionist, and I hate losing, and I hate failure. So, for me, the ability to, like, let go and just be like, "Eh, whatever. We tried." Like, that was huge for me. I remember in that moment, I was like, "Oh, okay," and tried a different song, then I'm like, "Okay, going back, now that I know more about how this goes, I'm gonna pick Your Song by Elton John because I know that song frontward and backward." Like, and it was great. I had a great time. More people came into the bar after that, so it wasn't the biggest blunder in the world, but I think what you're saying about knowing it's gonna suck and being okay with it, and just like, all right, like knowing maybe you have to stand on that stage and talk for whatever reason, but just being okay with the fact like this is what it is. I know more next time and I know what I'm going to do differently. That's a valuable lesson if you can take that away from it and not just get in your own head and say, "Oh, here's all the reasons why I suck and I'm going to forever suck." It's like, "Well, no, this is why this was bad. I now know the screen is too far away. I need to know my stuff more before I go up there, be better prepared."
Yeah. Yeah. Well, my karaoke song is Barbie Girl. So I know all of the lyrics to that song,
Nice.
and it's because I'm just a terrible person. But
You're a terrible
one of
person,
the
that's the
I'm a
lesson.
terrible person.
Why
Yes,
does
that's
that
the
make you a
lesson.
terrible person?
Well, it doesn't really. I just, they really missed a chance putting that song in the movie, but I guess this is an aside, but from what I read, the owners of Barbie absolutely hate that song and tried to get like Aqua like to squash it to like not have it out there, but Aqua's like, listen, we're allowed to do this. Like this is perfectly like legal. And so because of that like problem, they did not include it in the movie, despite the fact that everybody expected it to be in the movie. So going back to the actual topic at hand, one of the things that, what you said reminded me is that whenever we think about like giving, like doing public speaking, we're always comparing like our role models for public speaking are like TED Talks or like comedians getting on stage and being able to like, handle hecklers really well. And like we're talking about people who have like hundreds, if not thousands of hours of public speaking experience. Like somebody who is giving a TED Talk has given that talk probably dozens, if not hundreds of times.
And thousands in front of their bathroom mirror.
Absolutely, absolutely. That mirror has seen some things, let me tell you. Um, and so, uh, you know, like,
Pause.
we can't yeah. One thing to keep in mind is if you are giving a talk at a small conference, if you're giving it at like, you are in a certain space and you've been invited to give a talk, like for instance, like a DrupalCon or higher ed web or like, various like these niche conferences where
Where
it's a lot of like volunteers giving talks in return for like free tickets.
Yeah.
Realize where that bar is. Look at like some of the pre-recorded video talks that these organizations have put on and realize that like people aren't expecting, a TED talk. Um, they're expecting someone to be knowledgeable and to share information and, if at all possible, be engaging. And like
Mhm.
this is by resetting that standard, it makes it a little bit easier to be like, okay, I don't have to have great slides and great jokes and great content. I just have to have great content and an expertise in what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And that's the crux of getting up and speaking in public is that expertise in what you're talking about. That is going to make the difference between you being a nervous wreck and being less of a nervous wreck when you get up to speak in public. If it is something that you can talk about that really easily. Like I can
Yeah.
talk about everything like design under the sun. I can talk about board games. I can talk about tabletop role playing games. I can talk about Star Trek for hours. Like these are all things that I could stand up and give a 1 hour speech on,
Mhm.
without like flinching. But if you start asking me to talk about like taxes and investing, suddenly we get into a place where I'm just like, yeah, I'm not going to give that talk.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be the person. I'm not going to be able to do it. And that being comfortable with the subject matter is what makes a difference and understanding that like your perspective is valuable.
So would you say the 3 things that make for effective public speaking is 1, at bats, getting opportunities, or actually the
Mhm.
pillar of the whole thing, know what you're talking about, right? Be a subject
Yes.
matter expert in something. Don't just go up and speak about something you're probably gonna get a lot of pushback on from the audience if your data is not correct, whatever. So know what you're talking about, number 1,
Mhm.
do some research. Number 2, get at bats, practice, do a ton in front of the
Mhm.
mirror. I mean, I myself have practiced a ton of public speeches in front of my kids, my wife, my family. They've heard it all. So get those practice sessions for yourself. And thirdly, embrace the suck. Embrace that, okay,
Yes.
you're going to get up there. And even if you make everything perfect, you're still probably, hopefully, if you continue to if you have public speaking opportunities over the course of 5 years, I would hope that you look back to your first few 5 years later and just cringe. Be like, didn't know how to read the room back then, didn't know how to riff, right? Like, someone once said to me, if you want to become the best public speaker in the world, get into improv and get into some form of stand up where because when it's already has that pressure to perform and entertain
Yeah.
people, but those are the audiences that are the most willing to tell you in the moment you suck. and developing that thick skin. I mean, I've never done either of those 2. I don't know if you have. I know Todd has on your end,
Well,
but
let's talk about that. So I have not on depends on your perspective on whether or not this counts as improv, but I 100% believe that the decades that I've been spending playing tabletop role playing games like Dungeons and Dragons has absolutely given me a way to understand the dynamics of groups and expectations of groups. Like I run a lot of games. I'm the dungeon master more often than I'm not, and I have to like move the spotlight around, and I have to manage and make sure that everybody's happy. Like, is this person too bored? I need to make sure that they're
mhm,
paying
mhm.
attention, and I have to like. And I'm doing it week after week, like these like 3 or 4 hour sessions where I'm basically entertaining people
Yeah,
for hours on end, and it has absolutely given me a skill to understand like how an audience would respond to things. I mean, an audience really is like a larger, like Dungeons and Dragons table,
yeah.
and it makes me realize that, like, yeah, no, it gave me enough hours to enough practices, enough at bats
Mm,
to good public speaking skills, or at least reasonably good public speaking skills. I guess here's the thing: I I have shooed the public speaking, like, the the weirdness around it, the hesitation to do it. Like, I can get up and embarrass myself very easily, so I don't know if I do a good job. I just know that I do a job, and I have fun doing it, so there's
I
that.
do a job, I have fun doing it. It might be terrible, it might be great. That's for you to decide. I don't do a lot of D&D. I've done it a little bit, but I do host some podcasts where I've learned that moderating skill is most certainly a skill. I mean, I was doing one last night. There were 6 people on the podcast, and when you have that number of people, I think they said anytime on a podcast of 4 or more, you'll tend to get people to just be silent, because there's bigger personalities in the room that are going to
Yeah,
both like Godzilla, King Kong personalities that are going to fight for space on the stage. It's just going to
right,
happen.
and you have
And
to make sure Mothra gets attention too, right?
yeah, exactly. And so that's where I, like with someone last night, I know this person's got a lot of takes on what we were talking about, but was just being reserved and started becoming an audience member. And so I interject with whatever they're talking about. I add my point, but making sure I add a transition. And I, instead of having a shotgun question and hope that this person speaks up, I say, now, Luke, I know you're really passionate about this topic. So tell me, like, you can kind of see him like a little bit of anxiety, like comes in. Oh, I guess I'm, it's like you're a baseball manager and like, all right, get in the game. I can sub in, right? And they weren't expecting to play kind of thing. And so, I think that is a really useful skill set when it comes to public speaking, like you'd mentioned. Like you know when certain people aren't engaging. And you see that in stand up too, going back to
Mhm.
that, right? Where I think it was Jerry Seinfeld. Someone was saying, yeah, like you've got your people in the room that are really laughing and you like to hear that laughter over and over, but you can't help but look at purple shirt who's looking at his phone, isn't engaged. And you always note how stand-up comedians will just point at people in the crowd
Yeah,
and ask a question or bring something up. And when you're watching, it doesn't seem like anything. You're just interacting with the crowd. But there's something to that, right? To say, here's this person who doesn't care at all. That's a next level confidence, right? To say, I'm going to point you out, call you out, ask for some level of engagement. Now you're putting yourself at risk, especially if you're not doing stand up. It's something you're giving some informational session and you're interacting with the crowd, especially if you're interacting with those who aren't engaged. Now you've opened yourself up for this person to maybe still not engage with you. But on the flip
yeah,
side, if you win them over, well, the crowd, I think the entire crowd is going to get more vested because, oh, now any of us, if you're calling him or her out, you could call me out, Right? So what are your thoughts on that, on sessions where it does ask for audience engagement? And you see it more and more, right, with polls and other things
Mhm.
people do, like people ask people to pull their phones out. What are your thoughts on sessions where you try to draw in the crowd?
I think that it benefits any public speaking engagement that you're doing to make sure that people are engaged with what you're doing. So like if you're giving a 40-minute talk and people are like checking their phones and their eyes are glazing over, are you actually capturing what they need? Is it the right venue? Is because one of the things with modern conferences is that a lot of conferences are recorded, and so what will happen is people will attend, live so that they can get, like, questions in at the end, um, but they kind of disengage a little bit because they're like, "Oh, I can watch the video and catch up on it later. I'll check my email. I've got, like, some messages in Slack or something." Um, you know, it you as a public speaker, you wanna try and make sure that you're engaging people as much as possible. Um, and you can do that through polls, you can do that through, like, calling out people. It's like, "Oh, I see a lot of people on their laptops in the audience here tonight. Everybody must be posting on social media about how great this talk is. Thank you so much for that." Like, you can do those sorts of call outs. You can also choose to ignore it as well and lean into the people who are actually paying attention. One of the traps that I found myself in early in my like public speaking career was, there would be an audience of like 100 people, and two people would obviously be like completely disengaged, having like a whispered conversation, checking their email or something. And I'd be like, man, I must really be terrible that those people aren't paying attention. Meanwhile, everyone else was. Sometimes you have to be like, you are not going to reach everyone. You are not going to engage with everyone. You want to engage with the people who are going to engage back. So like all of the like fun things that you can do during a talk to try and increase engagement, do those things. That makes a talk more memorable. But also make sure that when you're doing it, you're doing it to reinforce the learnings of the talk itself. Like I've attended some talks where like people throw like beach balls out into the audience for the audience to like, move around, and like it's cool, it makes it feel like a party, but I don't remember that talk to save my life, you know? Like, I
Yeah.
don't remember what it was about. Um, and so there's yeah, it's engaging with the audience is a double-edged sword for sure. You wanna
Mm,
make sure that, like, you're trying to engage them when you can, but also realize that it is okay to let people check their phone and ignore that, because
mm,
at least for me early in my career, those couple of people doing that were really like dragging me down and dragging my energy down as I was talking. And I
mm.
was just like, I have to start looking at all of the people who are engaged and care. And like after I'm done talking, all the people who come up and ask me follow-up questions and all of that kind of thing.
I do really enjoy when someone's giving a talk and you can tell that they know after 5, 6 minutes, people are gonna be disengaged. And usually in those moments, like if it's like a preacher or if it's a talk on something that's, I don't know, maybe it's more human focused, right? And they'll say, all right, here's all these points. Here's my data. Spend 5, 6 minutes on that. And then they transition to a slide with an image. And that image is just a person. And now all of a sudden they're telling a story. Now, they haven't done anything specifically to engage with the audience. But what I can tell is that person knew, okay, after this long, if I keep hammering the audience with data over and over and over, after 40 minutes, even my most engaged people are going to be tuned out. And so when I see people using devices like that to say, yeah, they're still talking. They haven't asked anyone any specific questions, but they knew how to structure their talk to engage the audience's various parts of their brains. Because when you tell a story, they talked about, I forget how many parts of the brain. They said it's the most. When listening, you use the most, your prefrontal cortex. They're all you use everything with your brain 'cause you
Mhm.
visualize it. And now, for if you were somewhat engaged, and the moment you start diving down and you're starting to think about work and everything else. Now the story's got you completely wrapped back into it and ready for more information. And so storytelling is another really powerful tool if you don't have the ability at your talk to throw out beach balls. Start thinking about your talk from the perspective of the audience. Is there an appropriate moment to tell a story? Can you pivot? Should you be introducing polls? But think from their perspective and asking, if you are presenting to family and friends and other people, at what point did I lose you? All right. Now, maybe if it's your mom and you got a great relationship there, maybe she's like, I was engaged the whole time. All right. So maybe you present like in front of your friends. If you have friends who will just be real with you, like do
Mhm.
that. But think from their perspective. And at what points are you losing them that you need to add in something to just get people hooked back into it again. So now, if people are listening to this podcast today and for some reason they're still engaged by the end of it, I want to be sure everyone knows this isn't the end of this podcast. It's not a mini series. We're going to be going for some time. But it's not your standard talk. We have a group, don't we, Randy? It's somewhere. It does
Yes.
exist.
Yes. It does, it does. It exists on LinkedIn.
Green
We have a group on LinkedIn for Design and Good Company for people to get together to ask questions, to have discussions, to
post
learn
memes.
how to post memes. I mean, gotta have memes.
Do we still have those these
And
days? Do people still post them?
oh my God, yes, yes.
Oh, I'm
Listen,
I'm in the wrong all the
if
wrong channels.
my daughter is a meme expert, so if we need to bring her in onto the show, we
Yes.
can do that.
All right.
Um, Yeah, but it is over on LinkedIn for, like, community building, and we're just gonna see, like,
Yeah.
have everybody come around and chat and talk and learn together and grow.
This has been another episode of Design in Good Company. Randy, always a pleasure. Folks, if you're listening, join the discussion, join the group. We're going to be bringing people on. We're going to be doing the show live and streaming it there, but also if you want to be on, you have your own thoughts. You have your own talks that you have like if you've given talks and you want to talk about it with us, reach out, right? Come onto the show.
And here's the thing, we want to hear from everyone in the community. We wanna hear from people who are just starting out in their career, people who are in the middle of their career, changing careers. We're not looking to have, like, big names on the show, we're looking to have your name on the show.
Absolutely. Man, what a tagline. Not big names, your name. But if your name is a big name, we're not going to say no to that either because hey, like we
No,
want
that's true.
we want the community to grow a little bit. So that is this week's episode. Links in the description. Y'all know what to do. Thanks so much for tuning in and really excited for y'all to listen to the next episode where Randy and we were in person last week and we were filming at Yale, actually. So we're going to talk a lot about branding. Really excited about that one. We were literally walking and talking. Somehow we did both at the same time, and not everything went awry. So be sure to tune into that. But to watch it, you're going to have to go follow us on YouTube. So be sure to go do that for Kitchens. You'll find it, all the stuff about that. They've got other good podcasts and things you can check out, like the future of content. So go check out the YouTube channel. This is Design and Good Company. We'll see y'all again real soon.